Hey everyone, welcome back to the Caderna podcast. I'm Brian Caderna. In today's episode, I'll be sitting down with Joseph VanDusen, call sign Chronic. Joseph is in rare air, no pun intended, as he belongs to the elite community of B-2 stealth bomber pilots. He's one of only 600 hand-picked pilots to ever fly the exclusive $2.2 billion aircraft in its 30-year existence. Joseph finished #1 as the distinguished graduate of his Air Force pilot training class, was deployed 7 times, and tallied up 139 combat missions. In 2014, he was named B-2 Pilot of the Year, and in 2015 earned the B-2 Aircraft Commander of the Year award. It was in that same year that Joseph became one of only a few pilots ever to fly a 31-hour exercise, in which he led a 3-ship of B-2s on a strategic messaging combat deterrence mission. Joseph is now an entrepreneur, author, and well-known personal development speaker, in addition to flying the 787 Dreamliner for United Airlines. His book, Stealth Elevate, is a popular source of leadership and personal development gems forged over a career of top-level leadership. You can learn more about Joseph VanDusen at www.stealthelevation.com. Now, without further ado, here's Joseph Chronic VanDusen.
Is going to require work and time and sweat and toil.
If money wasn't an issue, what would I be doing?
Don't worry about it. You'll figure it out.
Change is the only constant.
The Caderna Podcast.
Joe, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Brian. I'm a big fan of all your content. You've had some amazing guests on, and you deliver some gems yourself. So I'm just excited to be here, and hopefully I can add some value to your listeners.
Thank you. Yeah, without a doubt, because I do have to say you're the first B-2 bomber pilot I've ever had on the show. And how does one go about that? I mean, is that something you dreamed of being as a kid, like a pilot, or how do you end up there?
Yeah, no, so my background's a little bit different. In the bomber, we had several folks that were all about being bomber pilots, and they grew up in the B-52, and then they wanted to get to the B-2 or the B-1, and then they wanted to get to the B-2. But I grew up in Grand Rapids, Michigan, small Midwestern town, and I went to air shows as a kid with my dad and my grandfather. And out of that came that love of aviation. And I was like, I want to do this, but nobody in my family was a pilot. Nobody had really served in the military, in fact. So my grandfather served in World War II and in the South Pacific, and he was a mechanic on B-17s and B-29s. But he really didn't talk about it. That generation just, they were pretty tight-lipped when they got back home, and they just wanted to live life, right? They've seen a lot of bad war. So yeah. I never had that influence. I just knew that I wanted to fly, and I wanted to fly in the military because I wanted to do the loops and everything that I see at the air shows. Yeah. And so I went about that process, kind of just out of nowhere. I as I was going through high school, I'm like, yeah, I don't know what I want to do other than fly. So it turned out that there was Western Michigan University was like an hour from my house, and they had a big aviation program, and I was like, well, why not just apply there? And I did, and I kind of stumbled into the whole thing, right? And then from there, I got the itch to go down that military path, and wound up in the Air Force, got selected for pilot training, kind of a weird way too, through officer training school. Most pilot slots come from the Air Force Academy or ROTC, and I kind of came in off the street late in the game. So I was honored to get one of those assignments, and during that time, I was waiting too. They were like, "Hey, congratulations, you're going to pilot training." I was so excited. And then they were like, "Hey, we're backed up though. Well, you got to wait a year." And so I was like, "Man, here I am, this newly minted. I had my commercial pilot's license from Western Michigan University. I'm like, man, and now I got to find a job for a year. Like, what am I going to do?" So
Yeah.
I worked in a couple factories for a temp agency, which was really humbling for me at that time, kind of set me up for later success.
Yeah.
once I did get to the Air Force, I went to the KC-10 extender. That was an awesome big air refueling airplane. It was my dream assignment out of pilot training, honestly. And I started doing that and going all over the world, which was awesome. But I just realized that I kind of wanted a bigger challenge. And
Mhm.
they had just opened up the application process for the B-2 stealth bomber to everybody in the Air Force. And
What time frame was this, Joe? Like when
this
abouts did
would
you
have
get in?
been 2010, 2011 that I was thinking about it.
Okay.
I took my interview in 2011 for the B-2, but yeah, so that's the time frame. But I didn't know. I was like, you know what? I can't find out anything about the B-2. Nobody could tell me what that life was going to be like because it's so highly classified. So I'm like, you know, I don't know. I'm going to take a shot. Why not? And so I put in my
Yeah.
application process and got selected for the in-person interview. And then when I showed up for the interview, that was a whole different ball game too. But it's not like I was dreaming of being a B-2 pilot. I kind of just stumbled into that pathway, and
Yeah.
it was something that was challenging for me. And I was like, you know what? I'm gonna go do this. Why not? Why not just go and attack and see what I can do, what my potential is. And that's kind of led me into the entrepreneurial journey and all that stuff too. I'm just always always hungry for something more. And I think that's very important as we go through our life and as our excuse me, as our entrepreneurial journeys unfold or our business leadership journeys unfold.
Sure.
You got to keep learning, keep growing, and keep pushing yourself, because we all have these
Definitely.
unique talents and unique passions that we can give to the world. And that's what I'm trying to inspire people to do now.
Yeah, I love it. That's pretty cool how you've been able to tie it all together. And so one of the questions I have, like obviously this is a very small community of pilots. Was there anything looking back when you said, you know what, I'll throw in an application to, try out for the B-2? Was there something in there in that resume that made this panel say, you know what, this guy Joe over here, let's invite him in here for an interview? Was there something there that really stood out or separated you from the pack?
Yeah, well, I think, ever since my very first job in the Air Force, and people may be surprised to hear this too, that pilots aren't just pilots in the Air Force. You always have these additional duties, is what they're called, but really they're
Mhm.
your full-time job. So I would show up in training flight, for example, and I would be in charge of everybody's training and making sure that so-and-so went to their training and that everything was documented correctly. So we had these office jobs, and we got to develop that business side of things too. So I think one of the things that stood out is I elevated from as a what was I was a KC-10 co-pilot to start. Then I upgraded to aircraft commander, where I was in charge of taking the $88 million airplane and the crew and doing the mission all around the world. And then eventually I made it to instructor pilot. Well,
Mhm.
on the office side of things, I kind of did that elevation too. I worked from training flight up into executive officer, where I was working for the squadron commander, and I got to see things at a high level at a young age, and realize, the value of giving out praise and discipline, and how you can affect everybody with your leadership. And that's what really got me going into this leadership mindset and developing my own leadership style, which having those opportunities at a young age and excelling in that, I think that stood out on paper to the hiring board, and they were like, hey, you know what, this guy's performed really well, and he's been given challenges and excelled during that process, so let's bring him in for the interview and see what happens. So
Interesting. So they were impressed by that you had kind of a well-rounded background and wanted to be a leader. So it wasn't like they were just looking for, hey, we just want the best raw pilot out there. Like they actually cared about all these ancillary things as well.
right. And looking back on it, when I was in the B-2 community and we were hiring people, that's one of the big things that they're looking for, right? It's not just your pilot skills. In fact, I can teach anybody how to fly an airplane pretty much. It's the other stuff, the intangibles, the ability to stay cool under pressure, the ability to handle any situation that comes up, whether it's in the office or in the flight deck, you got to be able to keep that calm demeanor. You got to make rational and good decisions, and you have to process things at a very fast rate. And that's what they were looking for. In fact, during the interview process, it was fascinating. I show up and there's about 25 of us and for 16 slots. And so we're whittled down, and you meet everybody for the first time, and you're sitting in this big auditorium, right? And it's there's like a couple instructors that are there that are B-2 pilots, and they're saying, "Hey, welcome everybody." And meanwhile, we're all like looking around the room, sizing each other up, right?
Yeah.
And we're like, "Who's that guy? Who's that girl? Yeah. Who's my competition here, right?" But I just took that opportunity to say, "Hey, look, I'm here for a reason, and I'm going to go just give my best." And this is a lesson for anybody going through anything, honestly, is just bloom where you are planted. I learned that at a very young age in the Air Force. One of my very first mentors was like, "Hey, man, you're not going to like every job, right? But if you do your best and excel at that, do the best that you can, you're going to get opportunities from that success that you wouldn't otherwise get. So you need to make sure that you're always putting forth your best effort, do the best that you can, learn from your failures, and grow fast, and then you'll get the opportunities to go." And so the interview process, it was amazing. So we're sitting there, and they tell us, "Hey, look, you're going to do a simulator." And we knew that we were going to do simulator, but they're like, "This is an evaluation." And they give you maybe a 5-minute presentation on what the flight deck looks like. And they're like, "Okay, come back for your simulator time." And so I come back for the simulator time, and I'm so confused. I'm like, this is an airplane that looks nothing like I've ever seen before. So okay, cool. So I show up for the interview, and the first thing they do is lead you down the legacy hallway, and you go through this big bank vault door, like right, and just the weight of the situation, you just feel that on your shoulders. And it's incredible because you see walking down the hallway every class that has graduated from the B-2, and it was a pretty humbling experience.
I bet.
Everybody's framed up on there, and then they lead you to the simulator door through another bank vault door, and the door closes behind you. These things are like nuclear proof, so they're huge.
Where is this? Is this like in one spot of the country, like
So this is
simulator?
Whiteman Air Force Base. It's an hour east of Kansas City.
Okay.
That's where we have all the B-2s, and so it's in
Do
the
you
middle
see
of
the other candidates like coming in and out? Like, are they walking out like, "Oh my gosh"?
Like there's a lot of that, right? They have the bug-eyed look on their faces. They're like,
That's
I'm
funny.
like, wow, what just happened there? So we sit down in the simulator, and my evaluator was awesome. He's like, "All right, Joe, hey, we're gonna go up, we're gonna do this thing. Here's the stick and here's the throttle. I'm gonna kind of tell you the next maneuver we want you to perform, but this is a evaluation. Go." And you're like, "Whoa, holy cow, man, I've never seen any of this stuff before. How am I going to do that?" And this is one of the things that I teach when I speak or when I do consulting, executive coaching. I'm like, you got to be able to compartmentalize. And what that means is just take your environment and put it in the back, whatever's going on. Maybe you're going through a divorce, maybe you're going through some sort of challenge in life that has really got you weighed down, financial pressures like you talk about. So you got to be able to take all of that, put it in the back of your head in a little container, and that's just compartmentalization in a nutshell. And you focus on the moment and just perform. And so that's what I did in that time. And pilots are pretty good at this. In fact, we're probably too good at this because we have a pretty high divorce rate. I fly with folks all the time that are very good at what they do, but they haven't been able to tie in that personal development piece. And that's another thing that I'm working on is stealth elevation, is we're tying in not only the performance factor, but the personal development factor, and putting those two together, which is such a need in today's society. But anyway, I'm sitting there in the simulator, and it's time to go. And so I compartmentalized, I put everything in the back of my head, and here we go. And so I'm like, all right. And so I just took a deep breath, and this is what I do when I have like an engine failure or anything like that, like a crisis moment. Just just, we call it smoke a lucky, right? Like a little lucky candy cigarette or something. Like, just take a breath, because if you immediately go into a decision-making process, you're going to make a bad decision. You're going to be nervous. You're going to be upset, like whatever it is. So you need to take that breath, orient yourself, and then go out and do it. So I did my compartmentalization, took my deep breath, and I said, hey, look, I'm going to give it my all right now. I don't know, I'm going to fail. And so you got to be able to fail forward and grow in those moments. And I knew I was going to screw stuff up. I'd never seen this airplane before. Clearly, I don't know how anything functions. I'm just, there's a stick, there's a throttle. Oh, that's all I know. It's pure flying.
Yeah.
Let's go.
Yeah.
So we took off and we did the maneuvers, and I screwed up many things. But I kind of laughed it off in my head. And turns out, at the end of it, they don't tell you how you did or anything like that. They're just like, okay, cool, we'll let you know how you did. But the point is, like, hey, you got to be able to fail forward and grow fast. And that's what they were looking for. And so when you
Yeah.
go back and you talk about like that well-rounded individual that they were looking for, well, it's somebody that is also able to process things and get over their mistakes very quickly. And that's what separated B-2 pilots from the rest of the pilots that I've ever flown with. It was like, just, man, you're going to screw stuff up, but the faster that you can recover, and first of all, you make a
Yeah.
decision, and then you recover from that path. But you got to be able to make a decision and go down that pathway and realize that, hey, that's the wrong way, and pivot real quick into the right way.
Yeah.
And there's all kinds of ways to do that. But
Sure. Hi there. I hope you're enjoying the episode so far. Pardon this commercial interruption, but this episode has been brought to you by Weekly Wealthy Wisdom, my weekly e-newsletter that tens of thousands of subscribers already enjoy getting in their inbox every Monday. In Weekly Wealthy Wisdom, you'll find my latest insights on health and wealth in less than a 2-minute read, including some of my favorite quotes, books, products, health hacks, paragraphs to ponder, and much more. Start your week out right with Weekly Wealthy Wisdom. Now back to the show. And a couple of questions I have on that. So, as I'm hearing everything you're saying, what's the age range here of the candidates? Are you guys all of a similar age, or is it kind of like all over the map in the career spectrum?
I would say everyone was through their first assignment cycle. So at least 4 years of active flying in the Air Force. So you'd probably around between 28 to 32, 33-ish was the age range. Because there were several people that had applied several times and they didn't get hired. And then maybe finally they got hired on the 4th or 5th time. But this was my first time, and I'm like, I don't know. I'm going to give it a shot. If this doesn't work out, I'm going to go in a different direction. But
because like I think about it, as you mentioned, like you're trying to compartmentalize and just focus on the task at hand. I imagine that of these candidates, there's different levels of maturity just through life experience of a younger guy, an older guy, or someone that's maybe dealing with issues, at home or has family or kids, or another one who doesn't. He's 28, young bachelor. And do those play a factor, or no matter what, are the good ones just shutting everything out when they're kind of in the zone?
Good question. I don't know. I think I think the ability for those to compartmentalize and to be able to be in that moment and perform really separated all of the rest of that stuff. I mean, everybody's always going through stuff, right? We all have our own little baggage of the moment that we're dealing with. And
true.
And when I talk, I'm very specific about this in my speeches and stuff. I'm like, dude, you need to be able to compartmentalize, but you need to also not be a psychopath, right? And just you need to deal with that at some point. You can't just I'm gonna be in the moment and always be in the moment. No, you gotta. And what we teach is you work strategically from the target backwards, whether it's life or leadership, business, anything, which is a different concept. But it's the ability to compartmentalize and just focus on the moment when you're in a crisis situation. And I like to dole down into that, because a
Mhm.
crisis or high performance situation, you need to be able to perform in the moment. But otherwise, you need to back up and make sure that you're dealing with all that other stuff that's going on, because otherwise you end up like I was an instructor in the B-2, newly minted. I was on top of the world, and then my divorce came and I hit my lowest point. But it's because that
Mhm.
I didn't work on myself in my evolutionary climb to be the best B-2 pilot, best pilot, whatever. I was so focused on work, and as executives and entrepreneurs and leaders, we
Yep.
all get into this, right? We're like so driven by the next thing, like, oh, I can do this, and I can learn this, and I can grow to this and stuff. But you got to bring that personal development piece along the way. Otherwise,
Yep.
you're just you're not going to live life to the fullest and deal with the things that you need to deal with, be a whole human being, the true wealth that you talk about
Sure.
on your
Yep.
show.
And to that point, I know you've mentioned, a few times kind of this personal development in tandem with what you're doing professionally. Is that in your experience, is that a concern in the military or in the Air Force? Like, are they constantly saying, all right, you flew this 20-hour mission. Now let's talk about, how's life at home? Or are they just like, I don't want to hear that. Like, just come to work and do your job.
Yeah.
Where's that kind of the status of personal development? You hear so much about mental health and all that. That's like a buzzword now. Where's the military in that conversation?
I've been out for a few years now, but my experience is that we need to do a much better job of that piece with our leadership. And that's kind of what
Hmm.
inspired me to form Stealth Elevation, my company, because it is true that the military expects you to do the mission first, mission first, mission always. And so I got done with a record breaking for me at the time, and very few people had done this, was fly over 30 hours. I flew 31 hours nonstop, and we
Jeez.
had like 24 hours of recovery time, and that wasn't enough time. So,
Yeah,
but
I don't think so.
it's that piece of it. Now, I will say this, it comes down to what I've found is the individual leader that's in charge of those situations. So I've had some phenomenal leaders that are very concerned with your mental health and mental well-being. And when I was going through my divorce in the military, I had the most amazing leader, and I owe a debt of gratitude to him each and every day, because without the opportunity to go and work on myself, and he gave me the time to do that, I would not be where I am today. And I don't know where I would be, because I needed to do that mental development. I needed to go to counseling. I needed to explore myself for the very first time in my life, in
Mhm.
order to get those foundational things that I didn't have. Whereas some bad leaders would just be like, oh, okay, I don't care what you're going through, right? Like, you're here, be here the next day. We need you. We're a man short, and you're putting extra work on the rest of the squadron and this and that. So, I mean, that happens in the corporate world too.
Sure.
It's just so it comes down to the individual leader. But if they themselves aren't personally developed or self-developed, then they're not going to have that attitude, that platform to care about your well-being either.
Yeah.
So um
And to that point, like, I think when you look at leadership and you mentioned the good leader, I feel like in any sort of kind of like bureaucratic environment or larger company, perhaps even in the military, a good leader can rise, as they're caring about, their peers and their subordinates, and they get rewarded for that. But I feel like sometimes a bad leader that's like, I don't care about that, Joe, get the job done. They might be able to stay there, that there might, like, you guys as the people underneath that commander or that supervisor, your thoughts may not be able to kind of go up the chain of command. Did you find that where it was like you didn't have a voice to that next level, and they could just kind of hover there, and maybe they're not being held accountable because they're dealing with the guys, quote unquote, like underneath them?
mm, yeah, and I feel like the B2 community would kind of root that out more so than any other community that I've been a part of. So,
Really?
but that being said, and I'll get into that in a second, but the, leaders typically, whether it's corporate America or military or whatever it is, we typically rise based on performance, right? So,
Mhm.
your ability to execute is better than so and so, so you get this promotion or whatever it is. And sometimes it's the antithesis, where it's, hey, this person has risen to this level because they stabbed somebody in the back to get there, right? and
Yeah.
and that was what was weeded out in the B2 community fairly early. So even if someone was elevated to a position of authority, like an ops group commander, wing commander, or something like that, yes, they're occupying that position, but they don't have the respect of the crew force, because everybody would know what the backstory was. It was such a small community in that sense. Like, you
Hmm.
knew everybody. So, and
Gotcha.
how they got to that position and whatever. And I think one of the lessons is like, hey, if you're in that spot and you've lost the credibility of your workforce underneath you because maybe you made a bad decision or whatever it was, you need to start building back that rapport and that trust. And the way that you do that is by being a servant leader. That's one of the biggest things that I teach at Stealth Elevation is just, hey, look, you need to serve your people and get out of your own way, right? And figure out the obstacles in their way, eliminate those obstacles, and delegate to them and let them perform and show you that they are capable of doing whatever job you hired them to do. Get out of this micromanaging crap, and you got to trust your workforce, give them the opportunity, give them the mentorship. And that's something we don't do right now either, is there's so many distractions with leaders and companies right now, and we're so stuck in this triage of the fire of the moment, the fire of the day, and we need to get back to a strategic to tactical mindset that helps us to look past whatever's going on in the day. Yes, you have to deal with those fires, but you also have to stay strategic and create a vision to get yourself, your company, your employees out of whatever situation that is that's bringing you down, and create a better future.
Do you think, like, and that's awesome. It seems like you guys as a B2 community were kind of like at optimum efficiency. I imagine a part of that is also helped because it is so small.
Yeah.
And I think, like, even when you look in corporate America, I know Mark Zuckerberg has talked about this with Facebook, or now Meta, that they create kind of these little silos where they'll have these competitions or just free time just to go think, where they'll get 24 hours to kind of almost have a party, or like a thinking party with like this little clique. And then they come out of it in these ideas, like, like reels, or buying Instagram, or just kind of, the chat function in Facebook, like all these ideas come out of that. Do you find that much in the military? Like, was it on purpose to have your B2 community be so small, or is it just a lucky byproduct of being kind of like an elite group?
Ooh, good question. I think, those kind of things, those think groups and different things, you absolutely have to do. But I think the way that we did it, and because of the way that the B2 crew force is designed, and hired in, from the greater Air Force, it's very unique. But the way that we did things, I'll just touch on this, is
Sure.
when we would set out for a mission, right? And I talk about this in setting up how to elevate your life and leadership, this new book series that I have. And the first one is the target backwards approach. And this is how we would always function in the B2. When we went out for a goal, whatever it is, and I've adapted this to business and life now. So you set a goal, right, at the beginning of the year, or whatever it is. Let's say it was to make $23 million in 2023. Well, there's certain amount of growth that needs to happen for you to become the person that is able to do that. And that's just a personal goal. So if you're doing this for your business, it's a little bit, it's larger and encompasses much more. But how we would set about it was from the target backwards. And so you put that target out there, excuse me,
Mhm.
and you work in a way that is, we used to use SMART goals as a foundation. Dr. Doran, 1981, came up with SMART goals, and I'm sure you've probably heard of that, or, it's
Yep.
been around for a long time, but specific, measurable, attainable, realistic, and timely. And so when you're setting goals, you want to have these criteria, because, and the whole purpose is to be able to debrief at the end of this segment, right? So at the end of your goal, you want to be able to debrief and figure out whether you failed or you succeeded and why you did that. And I think that's why we succeeded so well in the B-2, and we were able to elevate to new ideas so quickly and solve impossible goals on a daily basis. I mean, we were up, it was crazy how much planning goes on that we don't actually execute, because these are high level, like, hey, if we have to go attack X country today, how do we do that? How do we break down the door? How do we get there? And so what I've done is taken the SMART goal process and adapted it to business a little bit more finite, hard hitting, because those two in the middle, attainable and realistic, are kind of, we shouldn't even have those, is what I've figured out, because everybody stumbles upon that. They're like, wow, what's attainable? What's realistic? And when you're going for your life and your business goals as an entrepreneur or leader in your corporation, you want to not have, in my opinion, attainable and realistic goals. You don't know what that is until you set up the process so that you can debrief at the end and figure out, hey, was it attainable or realistic? I don't know. When we went through and executed on this, turns out it wasn't, or it was, and we were too low. Our bar was too low. So what I've done is taken that, and the target backwards approach is talking about, target backwards, strategic to tactical. And we set up what I call SMT goals. And it's just, I took those two out in the middle. So
I like
you
that.
want to
Yeah.
just have, specific, measurable, timely. Those three elements are essential for your goal setting, and then you can go out and execute on that. So you set out your goal, and then you go out and you delegate. And I talk about this in my second book on this series. It's The Art of Elite Execution. And you set up contingency plans, and you do how goes it meetings, which are just 15-minute meetings. You bring everybody back together and you say, hey, how's it going? What's in your way? And this is a great tool for a leader. Have these little meetings, start them on time, finish them early if you can, but no more than 15 minutes. Bring your people back together while you're executing your goal and say, hey, look, how's it going? Do I need to eliminate anything from your pathways? What's holding you up? And as the leader, you need to be able to delegate those tasks and stay out of the micromanaging facet, stay strategic, get the obstacles out of your people's way, and then send them out to do it again, do the tactical execution. Now at the end, and what made us unique in the B-2 is that we would spend 3 hours debriefing this stuff, and you don't have that. But we came up with this way of debriefing where we would say, okay, we would take our original goal, our specific, measurable, timely goal. Let's say it's make $23 million in 2023. And at the end of 23, you go, hey, look, it's December 31st. Did we make this or not? And you start going through this process of, hey, I'm gonna figure out the contributing factors. We did not do this because of X. Maybe there was, we had a financial wrench that came in the middle of the year, and we didn't pivot quickly enough to do that. So you go back and you analyze these goals that you set at the beginning of the year, beginning of the month, beginning of the week, day, whatever. And you say, hey, what are the what are the contributing factors? What's the root cause of that? So there's one root cause that caused you to fail or succeed. You got to identify that. And then the key is it coming up with what I call an exciting elevation. So like, what will we do next time? And that way you're building a foundation to grow off of, and you're not just constantly setting new goals that you don't know if you're succeeding, if you're building, if you're anything. So these things at Meta that you talk about, these think tanks and all that stuff, great, but really you need to bring the process from goal setting through execution and then debrief to figure out the lessons learned so that you can stack that. And now all of a sudden you start stacking better goals on top of each other, and now you're getting somewhere, right?
Definitely. And a question I have on that, I mean, there's so much to unpack here, but one thing that comes to mind, Joe, I know I've seen it a million times in the business world, especially with entrepreneurs, is that you get this idea, you find something that lights the spark, and then you get married to it, and you're like, I know we can do this. And when you said you have your SMART goal and you take out, attainable and realistic, which I get that. But then what happens when, you've got 10 guys on the team and 9 are saying, dude, we tried that. That's just not in the cards. And the one guy is saying, I swear this is a game changer. We've got to make it work. This is, they love it. That's their passion. How do you address that? Because I see that happens. And sometimes you could have a really talented, killer member of the team that feels like they're ousted because they had this idea that you got the other 9 guys saying that just, we can't do it. That doesn't work. It doesn't have a part here. How do you handle that? Do you keep it going, or does that go up to vote? Like, or do you have a leader that says, no, that idea is getting nixed? Like, where do you go from there?
So that's a great question. That's a very delicate situation, right? And
Mhm.
luckily in the military, we've had these things at a young age, and you want to make sure that you're inclusive of everybody, right? And that you're fostering that creativity and the ability to bring out these ideas from everybody on the team. And if somebody comes out of left field, this is a game changer, this is what we need to do. And the rest of the group says, oh yeah, I don't know. I think this. So you can flush out that pathway for a few minutes with them and say, hey, okay, how does that work? How does that play out? And let them explain in the public forum. And if they can't do it, then you need to bring that person aside separately. And I think Vince Lombardi said this, praise in public, criticize in private, right? And that's how good leaders that I've seen and that I've taken these from great mentors is like, dude, you cannot throw that person under the bus right now. Maybe they're out in left field, or maybe you just need to be a leader and bring them into a closed space with just you and be like, hey, look, this isn't really going to work for us, and maybe that's a future capability. Can you explain that to me? I don't want you to feel like you can't bring these ideas up in the meeting, but we need to remain focused on our strategic target right now, and we'll flush this out at a later pace or whatever. But that's how I've seen the best leaders handle those type of situations. Bring that person aside, make sure that they're not, if everybody laughed at them in the meeting or whatever, I definitely would take that person right there afterwards and be like, hey man, like, what's going on? Or can we talk about this deeper? And
Yep.
I love that you have that passion for that idea. Maybe that's a future capability. Let's go down that pathway after we succeed at this current strategic goal that we're going after. But
Got it.
that's how I've handled that in the past.
Yep. And I love that. I love that kind of, praise in public, criticize in private. I remember one of my teachers I really liked in high school said that, like, when he would have a rowdy student that he just couldn't control. And it's like, man, kid, you're like disrupting the whole class here. You're driving me nuts. And a lot of teachers would just freak out back then when they were kind of allowed to. And he always said, at the end of the day, he'd pull him aside, like right when the bell rang, and step outside the classroom and kind of tell him, like, listen, like, I know you want to be the man. I know you want to be cool in front of all your friends and your classmates, but like X, Y, and Z, we got to cut that out. And he said it was always just a casual conversation, where then in front of the class, it was like a stage where you could never really have that.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. But so I want to continue with some of this personal development, but I want to hit the rewind button real quick, because you had mentioned that flight that I'm sure a lot of listeners just kind of like, wait, he didn't say that you flew for 31 hours.
31.
Can you
Yeah.
tell us what that was? Like, what job entails that timely flight?
Yeah, so that was a training mission. It was a combat training mission, a strategic deterrence mission that we did. We were deployed to Guam, and my squadron commander, best leader that I ever had, he gave me the opportunity to lead that flight, and it was huge. It was huge not only for my personal development in sense of a B-2 pilot, just being able to go that long, and it was also an execution. There was my instructor upgrade was hanging on the balance of if I could do this mission or not. So there
Okay.
was a lot of pressure to perform. But really, we were going to integrate with Red Flag Alaska, which is a huge exercise with 90. We were to integrate 90 different multinational airplanes in this very small space over Alaska. And basically, it simulates the first 10 days of the conflict. And this was night one. And so here come the B-2s from Guam, and we're going to drop simulated weapons on targets, and then off we go into the darkness again, kind of the deal. So it
How
was
many, when you say you're the leader, just to interrupt real quick, are you leading, how many guys are actually on the plane with you? And are you leading like a set of other bombers or other aircraft? Like, what's that look like?
yeah. So there's two people in the B-2, which may be surprising for the listeners to hear too. There's only two, a crew of two, and you're gonna fly that long, 31 hours, crazy. So and there's different ways that we do that and control rest. But I was a 3-ship, so I was leading 2 other crews, and so they each had a leader within their airplane as well, the aircraft commander. And this was me being flight leader of the 3-ship, and here we go from Guam, and we took off to Hawaii for the first refueling, and then we went up north to Alaska after we went through our simulated weapon run with these 90 different airplanes and got everybody coordinated and doing the attacks. Then we hit up the second air refueling and started to march. So the first part of the mission, it's like the adrenaline is flowing, you're good, you know what you're going to do. And then it was basically it's the closest that I got to combat in the B-2, and everything was that way. They were sending target updates. They were doing everything that you would have done for an actual combat mission. So it was realistic
Yeah.
all the way. And
Wow.
and so we did 3 different air refueling events with 100,000 pounds of unloaded gas each time. And that was crazy because, that you're hanging on to another airplane for 20 minutes to get that gas, 25 minutes. And that's very precise flying. And at the end of it, the third one was at hour 24 into the mission, and you're exhausted. And
Jeez.
so you're basically taking turns with your co-pilot, like, hey, I can't get all the gas. Can you get up there and get the rest of the gas? And so we can make it. So it's just,
wow. So that's not like click a button, go on autopilot, and
no, that
just
is
cruise next to each other.
You're every time I air refuel, I mean, you're sweating, it's very precise flying. You're in this very small envelope, and you got to do it for a long period of time. And you're just hanging on and getting as much gas as you can, and you get back home. And I remember landing from that one, and my squadron commander was out there, and he was happy that he gave me the opportunity to do that. And he took a lot of flack for giving me that opportunity, because I was an aircraft commander and a lot of instructors wanted that mission. And he was like, no, I'm going to give it to Chronic. Chronic he's earned it. And so I was able to do it. I landed, and I remember stepping off the airplane, and it was like I had sea legs. Like you
Really?
just, like that cruise ship feeling, like, wow, you get off, like, wow, I'm on dry land again. This is crazy, because nobody's designed to fly that long.
Yeah. Is there space at all, like, to even walk around the plane? Like, I imagine just sitting for that period of time is not healthy.
Yeah, no, I mean, we would get up, so just standing up, it wasn't designed for crew comfort. It's a strategic bomber, and they
Yep.
didn't really put any effort into the crew. So you had behind us, the hatch would close, and we had about 6 feet of lateral space there that we could set up an air mattress, and we would step out of the seat and lay down. And if nothing else, if you didn't fall asleep, then you at least got away from the TV screens, and you could get some sort of eye rest during that time. And the other thing is, we would make sure that they would have a physiologist come in, and they would say, hey, look, you can sleep during this time and this time. And they made sure that that you didn't enter REM sleep, which is the rapid eye movement section of sleep, where you start dreaming and you start to process everything. That's where your brain downloads your short-term memory into your long-term memory bank, whatever. But when you're in that, and if you wake up in REM, and you've probably done this before, you take a nap that's too long or whatever, and you wake up and you're just
Yep.
groggy like the rest of the day. And so
Yep.
so keep your naps under 45 minutes and you'll see a marked improvement with that. But no, you couldn't like stand up. It was you could, but it was like hunched over. Maybe get up to like 5'7" or 5'8" in the back, so you're not like totally
Yep.
standing up. And then there's just that space to lay down, and that's pretty much it. There's a little camping toilet that we had, so we had that. But no, it wasn't. It's not like
That's as far as
like
comfort
the
goes.
787. Yeah.
Oh, I bet. And so just a couple of questions on that. So the B-2, I mean, it's called the stealth bomber. Is it undetectable? Like how far does that word stealth actually go?
So it's not undetectable. It's low observable, and that's we would have to explain that to people too. So it's not like you were undetectable. You're just like Superman on your wall back there or whatever. Like woohoo! You just come in and blow everything up, and nobody sees you coming, and that kind of thing. But there's different tactics that we use to make us low observable, and the stealthy part of the airplane shape is amazing. The engineers at Northrop Grumman did an amazing job, and they're coming out with the B-21 Raider, which folks may or may not have heard about, but that's the replacement for the B-2 and the B-1 bombers. And that's going to be another evolution, which is going to be great. But the B-2, the shape, the amount of engineering that went into it, there's nothing protruding. It's not a normal airplane in any sense of the word. Everything on the surface is very conformal, and it's designed to move radar waves away from the airplane. So it helps a lot, but the tactics that we employed made it even better. And so you had to do something, I guess, is to answer your question. Otherwise you'd get shot down.
Got it. Man, that's just, it's so crazy. Like the technology that you think of. And maybe kind of two quick questions on that is you mentioned like you always want to be leaning forward, reaching for what's next, growing in every facet of your life and your career. I think nowhere do you see that more prevalent than in technology. Like you just kind of alluded to. I think a lot of people out there, when they hear, oh, we're going to go do reconnaissance, or we're going to go drop a bomb over here, everybody just thinks, oh, they're drones. There's just some guy in Missouri with like an Xbox controller that is flying missions over Russia or something. What's like, did you guys ever think about that? Like in another year or 2 years, we're going to be like irrelevant because everything's getting kind of remote controlled here. Like, can you kind of clue us in at all as kind of like where that stands?
Yeah, and that's a great question, because all this focus on AI and all this stuff, right? And
Sure.
I think AI is a great tool. I use AI. I use ChatGPT for some marketing stuff and some different things. And the way that I equate it is, it's like an autopilot. It's a tool on the airplane that we use to lessen our workload. And I don't see it replacing a bunch of careers. I know there's some of that mindset out there. I think that, as humans, we evolve and we grow and we learn to utilize these new tools, and there will be some careers that go away, no doubt. But we'll evolve and we'll use these into the next thing. And I think that, that as specifically for pilots and stuff, yes, the drone technology is there, but there's something about having a human in the cockpit and being able to perform at an elite level that just machines. The power of our brain is incredible. And this is going to be the focus of my third book in this series, and it's called How to Develop Your Alpha Killer, Your Humble Alpha Killer Elite Leadership Mindset. And and it's all about the power of our brains, and how we only use about 5% of our brain power. And if we can tap into the subconscious, just imagine the capabilities. I mean, we don't think about our heart beating, right? Or how to process the image coming into our eyeballs. That's all done with our subconscious brain. And it's amazing that we were given this amazing tool to function through life. And so I'm going to explore some of those aspects in this next book. But you're always going to need people, and AI is only going to go so far. It's a tool like autopilot, and we need people to adapt to situations, because right now, like the drone technology and all that stuff, it's a good capability to have and to add, but when things go wrong, you want to have somebody in control that can make those decisions that no computer can think of as of yet. And maybe it'll get there, I don't know. But when we have an engine fire or something like that, or when the airspace is blowing up all around you and you're in combat and you need to get the weapon on target, well, let me tell you, no computer can do that stuff. And so utilize AI for what it is, and definitely use it for your advantages. It can help you in so many ways, in your business and your finances and everything. It can be a great research assistant. It can be a great kind of autopilot for you and alleviate your workload. But that's how we use autopilot, right? It's like we put autopilot on so that we don't have to worry about maintaining altitude and airspeed, and we can get back up to the strategic level and make those better decisions. And so I think it has the potential to do that for every aspect of our life and help us to elevate, get back to that strategic, get out of those fires of every day, and start to actually go toward a target. And we need to do that.
Got it. I agree wholeheartedly. And maybe last question kind of in the B-2 space that I have for you today. So you had at your hands some of the latest and the greatest that, American technology and innovation could come up with. Where do you think we stand right now on like a global scale, at least from what you've seen, what you've heard in the community, with the rest of the world? I mean, you hear so much now about just it's US and China, two global superpowers, and then all the stuff going on with Russia and what their capabilities are. But really, I guess China and the US kind of leapfrogging each other a little bit here and there. How do you feel about us right now? America, what's your quick impression?
Yeah, my quick impression is that we are falling behind, and we need to drastically catch up. And I think that's happening. We realized that a few years back when Russia started testing hypersonics, and the same thing with China, and we were like, whoa, wait a second, we're not right there yet. And so I think the defense industry is catching up rapidly, and with aspects like the B-21 and different things that are coming online. As far as a technology aspect, now China has been developing their weapons systems and their military and their reach for the last 20 years, while we were bogged down in Afghanistan and Iraq and different places. And so we were kind of destroying our military capability while they were building up, and they haven't been in conflict. So now it's like a rapid progression we still have the technological edge, but I think, China has come to a near peer, and that is the one area that we need to really pay attention to. Russia is, it's who knows, man. That's a crazy situation, because every day it's changing. And but just from a global perspective, and I loved being part of the B-2 community, because we were always on this global chess game with like what's going on and how do we shape the battle space or the future battle space for this and that. And I'm not saying that we're going to go to war with China. Hopefully we don't. I think there's a pathway that we can both grow together, and everything, especially as in the financial markets, and many aspects of business. China is very intertwined with the United States.
Sure.
So it's a great, it could be a great benefit ally for us in many circumstances. But they do have aspirations to expand their reach, and I think we need to have the capabilities to help protect not only our interests, but interests of other sovereign nations that aren't quite up to that capability. And so, so yeah, so I think we're on that near peer now. It's no longer the
Interesting.
United States.
Yeah. I mean, if it is what it is, I mean, if that's the
Yeah.
truth, like, and I think a lot of people would kind of have that thought or that feeling as well. So just to kind of wrap up a lot of, what we discussed today, I think a question I have, and I'm sure a lot of listeners would, really appreciate some insight into this. So you mentioned a lot, that if things hit the fan, you have to have kind of that human element to be able to compartmentalize and then immediately make decisions, based on the knowledge that you have. Do you have a particular instance or story where you got blindsided, while you were in that plane and you had to make those quick decisions where it did feel kind of like those life or death moments?
Yeah, so let me see. I got it several. I'll just pull back when so there's a decision making model, and I think I always like to relate stuff to people and help them in their decision making process. So Colonel John Boyd in the Air Force came up with, and this was a long time ago, 1970s, something like that. He came up with the OODA loop, and it's a decision making model that we base everything on in the Air Force, and it was part of our leadership training and all that. And it's something that everybody can use, and it's called the OODA. It stands for observe, orient, decide, and act. And those are the 4 steps. So when you're in a crisis situation, you want to make sure that you're doing that, right? And so to illustrate that, I'll tell you a story. When I had engine fire indications in the KC-10, it was my very first deployment sortie in the tanker, and we took off, and we were 590,000 pounds, and we're in the Middle East, and it's the heaviest that I ever took off. It's a maximum weight of the airplane. And I remember
Wow.
we're going down the runway, and I'm nervous because it's my first time this heavy, and it's my first time going to war. We were headed to Afghanistan. So I'm like, holy cow, we're going down the runway, and the runway, the end of the runway is getting closer, and we haven't rotated yet to get it airborne. And so I'm like, and it was my flying leg. So I'm flying, and the engineer finally calls out, rotate, whatever, and we pull up, and we're headed airborne. And I had this moment of like, wow, I'm flying this thing, it's heavy. Right. And so we get the gear up and everything, and passing around 1,800 feet, we got the engine fire bell goes off, and it feels like you're back in the simulator because you simulate this stuff all the time. Like, wow, there's engine fire. Okay. And I did exactly what we talked about earlier with the compartmentalization. You just take a breath, you smoke that lucky, right? You don't want to immediately make a decision in the crisis situation. You need to
Yep.
go through that decision-making model: observe, orient, decide, act. So you smoke that lucky and observe, and you're like, oh, okay, I got engine fire indications. It's a left engine. Okay, cool. So I've observed, I'm orienting now with, it's the left engine, not the right engine. Where am I? I'm at 1,800 feet going up to 3,000. Okay. So I'm building my situational awareness picture correctly so that I can make the decision and acting part of this happen. So then all of a sudden your engine's on fire. You got to do something, right? You got to decide to, hey, look, okay, there's in the Air Force and any airplane, we had what's called a boldface, and at United, it's quick reaction items, these things that you memorize. And so you're like, the checklist that you
Yep.
don't have time to look up, and you're like, okay, cool. So now I'm observing, I'm orienting, and now I go into, okay, the decision-making process. I need to bring out this memory checklist that I have. Okay, I'm going to shut down and bring the throttle back, pop the engine fire handle, rotate it, and expend the fire extinguisher. Okay. So now I'm making that decision, and I have to act. I have to put those things into motion for me to do that. And then once you do that and you shut down the engine, now you're back at the start of the OODA loop again. You go, okay, now I got the engine shut down, observe, orient, decide, act. I got to get this thing back down on the ground, right? So any situation that you're going through, any crisis situation, any high pressure negotiation, any sort of financial crisis, thing that we're going through, especially like I can imagine when SVB Bank failed, all of a sudden, like, whoa, holy cow, it's a shock moment. So
Yep.
you need to go through that, observe, orient, decide, act. And remember to smoke that lucky at the beginning before you do any of that, so that you don't make it, because you're going to make a rash decision, right? If you just go into deciding and acting like, oh, we need to do this, you didn't observe and orient your environment first. So most likely you're going to make a wrong decision. Like in the case of my engine fire, I would have been like, wow, there's an engine fire. I'm just going to decide that I'm just going to pull something and shut down the engine. I need to get this solved right now. Well, it would have been the wrong engine. And then what? Well, now we're really messed up. So,
wow, there are so many parallels there. I mean, obviously you're seeing it on such a intense, environment, but it's just like we say in finance, when emotion mixed with finance, and you could say when emotion mixed with any critical decision, usually the outcome is not a very good one.
yes.
And it's interesting because I think you pull back that emotion when you do like that OODA loop, I think he said, where you kind of you examine what the environment's like first before you say, oh crap, and then just hit a button, randomly, or pick an investment or sell or buy or whatever the case may be. And so in closing here, Joe, I mean, I could go on and on with this. There's so much insight here. One of the things I like to talk about with my guests, and I'm sure a lot of our regular listeners are familiar with me talking about how we discuss wealth in its original meaning, a state of well-being. If we look back at the etymology, the word going back to wheel, that's actually what it meant, was just well-being. So with this career that you've had, the life that you've led thus far, how would you define wealth to yourself?
Great question. I love the way that you talk about this. And it's true, like wealth and what I've learned and what I've gone through and recovering from my divorce and stepping into the entrepreneurial world and everything is, true wealth and true fulfillment in life to me is being able to give of your talents and unique passions to help other people grow, because I've never had more fulfillment and more wealth in my life. And that's not monetary, right? It's like just being able to help people and to turn the light bulbs on and have them achieve what they are setting out to achieve. It's been incredible for my sense of well-being. And it's along with that, I've learned to be grateful, right? So I wake up in the morning, the first thing I do, my heart's beating, and it's amazing, right? So we have been given a new day, a unique day, and I believe that each of us is to maximize that day, because we're not guaranteed tomorrow. And so I start with gratitude, and that just formulates my whole day. And now I can, if you start putting out that positive energy into the world, you're going to get it back. And it also keeps you from the negative stuff. So it's not like every day is great, blah, 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 but it's a matter of just setting yourself up, being grateful for the day, and giving of your unique talents and passions, the passions and talents that I don't have, that you don't have, that we all are given these amazing gifts. And I believe it's to give others and help them on their journey of life and what I call life, leadership, relationships, business, all that stuff. And to obtain their legacy impact, their true wealth and freedom, because that's what we're really all after, is just like, hey, what do we go to work for every day? What is our entrepreneurial journey or any of our journeys? It's for that true wealth, that fulfillment, that there's just that amazing feeling that you can't get with just being so focused on a monetary aspect of wealth. I mean, that's one aspect.
Yep.
It helps, but
but just one spoke of the wheel. That's spot on. Well, it was really cool, Joe. I feel like no pun intended when we say we looked at things from a 10,000 foot view. Maybe you've had an 80,000 foot view or however high you were flying. But this is awesome. So where can folks find out more about, what you're doing, what you're speaking on, a lot of great insights to take away here.
Yeah, I appreciate it. So stealthelevation.com is a great place to start. That's a website, but other than that, I'm on socials. I try to do little videos and little things. I'm on TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, all that stuff. Just trying to provide insights for your life and your journey to help you elevate to the next level. And so you can find me Joseph VanDusen on socials or Stealth Elevation. There's on any of my socials, there's a link tree that goes to everything that I've done recently, all the books and how to book for speaking engagements and leadership events. All that stuff is there. So I've tried to make it as easy as possible for people to find us, and they just have to make the decision to hey, elevate.
That's right. Well, thank you so much for the time, Joe. This is really, really interesting. I really had a good time having this conversation.
I had a great time with you. Thanks for having me, Brian. This is awesome.
Definitely. Well, everyone, thank you for tuning into another episode of the Caderna podcast. Again, I'm Brian Caderna. Today, we had the pleasure of speaking with Joseph VanDusen. Be sure to leave us a review wherever you're tuning in, and we will see you next time. This podcast is intended for the general public and for informational purposes only. The show does not provide any recommendations or investment advice regarding any specific account type, service, strategy, or product, or to otherwise act in any fiduciary or other capacity. Please contact a financial professional for guidance and information that is specific to your situation. Brian Caderna does not provide tax or legal advice. Please contact your accountant or legal advisor to discuss your situation. Guest speakers and their firms are not affiliated with or endorsed by Park Avenue Securities, Guardian, or Caderna Financial Team, and opinions stated are their own. All investments contain risk and may lose value. Past performance is not a guarantee of future results. References to specific securities, asset classes, and financial markets are for illustrative purposes only and do not constitute a solicitation, offer, or recommendation to purchase or sell a security. Brian Caderna is a registered representative and financial advisor of Park Avenue Securities, LLC, PAS. OSJ 300 Broadacres Drive, Suite 175, Bloomfield, New Jersey, 07003. Phone number 973-244-4420. Securities products and advisory services offered through PAS, member FINRA SIPC. Financial representative of the Guardian Life Insurance Company of America, Guardian, New York, New York. PAS is a wholly owned subsidiary of Guardian. Caderna Financial Team is not an affiliate or subsidiary of PAS or Guardian. California Insurance License Number 0K04194.